Mitsubishi shook the world when production of the all-new Eclipse began in 1989. The sporty coupe rose to fame after making a legendary appearance in the Fast and the Furious movie, and it held onto its status because of its enticing performance and enjoyable driving dynamics. Without a doubt, the first two generations of the Eclipse were a massive success, but Mitsubishi fumbled this car with the release of the third generation Eclipse for the 2000 model year. When this new Eclipse went on sale in 1999 for the 2000 model year, fans were disappointed that it no longer offered any of the hardware or specs that made its predecessors so well liked. Because of all this, sales started to plummet almost immediately. A lot of customers were complaining about how the new 2000 Eclipse paled in comparison to the performance of the previous two generations. Now, to be fair, Mitsubishi did make some effort to make the third generation Eclipse more enjoyable from a performance standpoint. For instance, they did offer a V6 engine for the first time, but at the same time, other things had got stripped away, like all-wheel drive and just the all-around sporty feel of the previous generation. Now, before I get into why the third generation Eclipse was such a failure among fans, I'm going to touch on what made the first and second generations some of the best drivers and tuner cars. So first of all, let's start with the legendary engine. Mitsubishi offered a variety of trim levels on the first and second generation Eclipse. All of these cars, except the base model, featured the iconic and highly desirable 4G63 engine. Okay, so you guys know I can't discuss the first two generations of the Eclipse without discussing Diamond Star Motors. So pretty much this is when Mitsubishi and Chrysler had joined forces. This joint venture was known as Diamond Star Motors. All of this resulted in the development of vehicles for Chrysler and Mitsubishi within an American factory. One of the cars they manufactured, of course, was the Eclipse. The Plymouth Laser was the other one, and the Eagle Talon was the other DSM. Now, you could get these cars with the 4G63 engine, and although these DSM cars had different names and sold across different brands, they were basically just cosmetically tweaked versions of the Eclipse. The Laser, it was okay. I mean, that one was probably the least like DSM. Plymouth was Chrysler's value brand, and the Laser was the value DSM model. Most enthusiasts went for the Talon or the Eclipse. Now, me personally, I always liked the look of the Talon, especially with the two-tone paint. I wasn't a huge fan of the Laser, but I always thought the styling cues of the Talon were fantastic, whether that was the first or second generation. But back to the Eclipse. Okay, so in its lesser form, the 4G63 engine came as a 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-banger. But if you needed more power, the turbocharged version increased that power output all the way up to 195 horsepower. That might not sound like a whole lot, but remember, these cars were relatively light. The engine was a dual overhead cam configuration, and it has smooth power delivery at all times. It was capable of providing impressive torque throughout the entire rev range, and its high-grade tech meant that it could handle way more power than it actually produced. For what you were getting, the Eclipse had relatively good performance from the factory. The top of the line GSX could run from 0 to 60 in about 6.8 seconds. But depending on who you ask, some have gotten in the low or even the mid 6-second range. A lot of people say that 1999 was the last year of the real Eclipse, quote unquote. The GSX model boasted a durable 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine capable of delivering an impressive 210 horsepower and 214 pound-feet of torque. While 210 is quite a bit of power to put on the front wheels of a small car, Mitsubishi went ahead and made all-wheel drive standard on the GSX, just like the first generation. Although a less expensive front-drive GST was also available. For the even more budget-minded, non-turbocharged RS and GS versions were available, as well as turbo and non-turbo Spider convertibles. The ultimate configuration though, a Spider GSX, was not available. So yeah, along with a great engine, first and second generation high-spec Eclipses came with all-wheel drive and a chassis tuned to provide sturdy suspension. The steering was also precise, and all of this stuff put together allowed the car to act with agility and just overall great handling. And let's not forget that wonderful design. I mean, these cars looked great then, and they are even more beautiful now, if that makes sense. So yes, it was an overall wonderful performance bargain. It's no wonder it rose to fame, especially after being featured in The Fast and the Furious. For the 2000 model year, Mitsubishi released the 3rd generation Eclipse, and oh boy, let me tell you, things had changed. There were no more Diamond Star motors, the Talon was gone, and the Laser was long gone. The Laser wrapped up production way back in 1994, and 1998 was the last year for the Eagle. This new Eclipse no longer came with the 4G63. It was replaced instead by a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder known as the 4G64. Yeah, and I know this might sound like an upgraded version of that legendary engine, but it was the complete opposite. This new power plant came with a single overhead cam that essentially killed the Eclipse's exceptional power delivery. It was the same engine you could get in the Mitsubishi Galant. The other engine offered on the 2000 Eclipse was a 205 horsepower 3-liter V6, but again, it too featured a wimpy single overhead cam configuration. And another thing, the Eclipse also shared several other parts with the Galant, meaning its steering was no longer as precise as in the previous generations, and even its suspension had become soft and squishy. Overall, this car just wasn't as sporty or as hardcore as the 1999 Eclipse. And to make matters worse, this new Eclipse did away with the all-wheel drive system. The overall reception of the 2000 Eclipse was you know, and sales began to dip almost immediately. A lot of people did not like the design of this car either. It was a dramatic, revolutionary design compared to the sleek and sporty 1999. Now, while some people found this design a bit polarizing, in all honesty, I thought this new Eclipse actually looked pretty darn good from a design standpoint. I mean, it had a nice shape with tasteful body lines. The headlight design was nice, and the interior was thoroughly modern, and it looked sporty too on the inside. And as far as the Spider, I thought it looked good whether the top was up or down. But overall, people just didn't like the fact that this car had got softer and was kinda just a shell of its former self. Mitsubishi did try to release more appealing versions of the Eclipse further down the line, such as the GTS Spider convertible. But despite all of this, nothing could really replace what the first 2 generations had offered. The 3rd generation went on sale from 2000 to 2005, and it shared a redesigned platform with the Chrysler Sebring and Dodge Stratus. In May 2005, the 4th and final generation Eclipse had finally come out, replacing the Chrysler platform used for the 3rd generation with the PS platform. Designers admitted that the 1995 to 1999 car served as an inspiration for the new 2006. So yeah, they tried to recapture the glory of the old days by not evolving the design of the 3rd generation, but by going back to the 2nd generation and modernizing that design. But still, this 2006 car gained a lot of weight and just wasn't taken as seriously as the 1st and 2nd generation cars. Okay, so that's it for this discussion. I will be producing another DSM video that goes more in detail with the 1st and 2nd generation Eclipse, and maybe even the 4th generation, we'll see. But for now, yes, this is why the 3rd generation Eclipse wasn't as loved as the 1st and 2nd. Alright, so I'll catch you guys on the next one.